So hi there and welcome to Mad Sense. This is a channel in which I'm going to answer some of the what the bleep questions about madness and hearing voices. I'll illustrate it with some examples and stories from my own journey into and out of madness. So as an intro, what I'd like to do is kind of show you how my approach is different and what you can expect from this channel. So the topics I'd like to cover are a sort of overview of what madness is, give you an idea of what's unique about my approach, and then I'll use the same chart to show you what you can expect from this channel. I'll wrap that up with a process definition of madness, and then one slide on the audiences that I'm hoping to reach with this channel. So what is madness? So madness for me is the emotional experience of answering the what the bleep questions that are provoked from receiving new stimuli, usually in the form of what's called hearing voices. So I began to hear voices out of the blue 10 years ago. It made no sense in the real world. At first, I heard two people talking about me when I was home alone. I very quickly and logically reached the conclusion that it had to be my upstairs neighbors. This idea lasted until I could hear the voices outside of the apartment, and they became extremely aggressive. Because by then I had no idea what it was. Voices themselves claimed to be all sorts of different things, and each attempt to explain them and answer these sort of what the bleep questions about them became the rather distressing experience of it. So what changed for me, very clearly, was that I suddenly started, receiving new stimuli, and as you'll see in some of the videos that follow, I'll show you how these weird stimuli provoked a reaction and a response that led to all kinds of distressing emotions and unusual behaviors. So what is it that's so weird about these stimuli? I use an icon of a jack-in-the-box to represent them because they are full of surprises. The phenomenon comes with many disturbing special effects. We commonly speak about the kind of sensory aspects of that, so we'll describe them as voices or sounds or visions or body sensations. There's much more to it than that. There are other features of this phenomenon that I just call body language. So for me, there are things like tempo, direction, distance, clarity, timing, all sorts of other characteristics that for me are akin to body language. So just in the way that when two people are talking to each other, a good proportion of the communication is non-verbal. We're picking up on cues from other people in the language they use, in the style, in the tempo, in their emotion, in their excitement, in their level of animation. So all of these body language characteristics are also exhibited by this phenomenon. So it's a very complex stimulus that it's actually presenting to the individual who hears voices or is exposed to these stimuli. This phenomenon is presenting them strategically and tactically, as I say, often in a timed way. And of course, it's presented with soap opera and drama. And my voices kind of set scenes, if you like, and create scenarios, which of course are also prompting these what the bleep questions. And of course, as you kind of reach interpretations of what this is, you don't have an ordinary frame of reference within which to do it, and we quite often reach interpretations in a sort of cosmic frame of reference. So most people actually experience this phenomenon as something other than themselves, and you can see why, because it has this sort of complexity to the stimuli that it's actually presenting. And so for me, the way to look at this is that I experienced all the so-called symptoms, so paranoia, mania, panic, racing thoughts, distress, unusual explanations and beliefs, so-called delusions. And for me, it was pretty obvious that all of that came from these weird new stimuli that I was suddenly receiving that had all these special effects and characteristics that we might not think of when we use the term hearing voices. So I found this experience so vile that I set out to understand what was going on. My voices pushed this theme. These are actual comments that my voices made, by the way. So they pushed this theme of you don't understand, you won't understand, you can't understand. And of course, that made me more determined to do so. And of course, the more I tried to make progress in understanding what was going on, the more nonsense voices threw at me and sort of complicated and confused what it was I was trying to achieve. So this phenomenon is presenting stimuli. It's popping information into the mind in an intrusive way. So I just call them intrusive phenomena. And of course, so it's number one, this is information that's arriving in the aware mind in an unusual way. So you notice it and you pay attention to it. Number two, I hear it and you don't. So that means our sort of frames of reference are very confused. We don't have the same frame of reference for even thinking about it. We certainly don't have the same frame of reference for how we experience it. And it's a little surprise that the hearing voices movement, so this is a group representing people who hear voices and experience extreme states, is the language that they actually use. And of course, it's no surprise to me that that terminology is how the experience is actually described. So this is what the public generally will call madness. It's what psychiatry as a profession will generally call psychosis. And of course, I say the hearing voices movement is giving an expression to, giving a voice to people who hear voices, and the term used in the movement is hearing voices and extreme states. Obviously, this causes distress in the mind. These unusual stimuli arriving, with all these qualities arriving in a weird way, are likely to produce a distressing experience, and they do. And of course, that affects both mental actually and physical well-being. It produces chronic stress. And of course, some of this spills over into behavior. So what's the first thing that's different about my approach is that for me, this is a very, very logical flow. It was the phenomena, the stimuli presented by the phenomena that were new. They had certain weird qualities that shaped the experience of it, that then shaped, of course, my mental and physical well-being. And some of that spilled over into behavior. So part of the problem is that at the moment, there is actually no clear path to recovery for people. There are many, many different groups out there and many, many different opinions. And it's very hard to see a clear way through it. And of course, this is what I'm hoping to achieve by tackling it in a different way. So as I say, the experience is it's scary because this stimulus is scary. It's confusing because it's throwing all this stuff at you, and it's complicated because it has so many layers. When you seek help, that's scary and confusing and complicated because I hear it and you don't, and we just aren't on the same page. And of course, what that does is it makes life very complicated. So what's unique to my approach? Just extending on the idea that there is a flow to it as things flow from these new stimuli. What I want to do is take a process approach. This is what's fundamentally different about my approach. For me, there was a very clear flow from stimulus to my reaction to it, to how I responded to it, to how I tried to interpret it. And of course, some of those distressful emotions spilled over into behavior. And what I'm trying to do is actually make some sense of the different ideas and beliefs and interpretations amongst the different stakeholders involved in the space. The three main ones are the mental health professionals, which is in this group is dominated by psychiatry and their ideas. And this is primarily because money flows from a diagnosis, and psychiatrists are the ones who are making a diagnosis. For many people with this experience, including myself, for me, the diagnostic terms and descriptions, they're just a collection of symptoms that have been given a label, really. Offer no help in terms of how you can actually move forward. with his experience. And in fact, it's not unusual for people to go to a psychiatrist and be told actually that this, this is something that will make the rest of their lives not very pleasant, and they may never work again. And of course, what we want to do is actually give people something they can act on. The voice hearing movement actually sprang up in a reaction, in pushing back against these kind of diagnostic labels. What the Hearing Voices movement has done is it's brought the focus to the experience of it. The difficulty with that is that individuals have different experiences. And what I want to do is kind of show you that actually, when you look at it from a process point of view, you can account for the fact that people have different experiences. There is the experiences are the kind of parts that we're aware of, which is the sort of mind-based stuff, if you like. There is an underlying process in the brain that supports our experience and our perception. And if you look at it from that point of view, I will show you that one process can support, can explain many experiences. There is another player in the space, and that is actually Joe Public. We have many cultural interpretations of this phenomenon over the millennia. Some of them have stuck with us for millennia. Of course, some of them are much newer. The issue with them actually is that they, number one, they shape the experience, and we know that some of them shape the experience better than others. Number two, these are beliefs that are held by people in the community. So, and of course, people in the community are your support group. And I mentioned on the previous slide that actually, that getting help is scary and confusing and complicated. One of the worst things that's happening in that phase is that other people are imposing their beliefs on you. And of course, that is coming from, that's driven by cultural influences. So it's important to understand how the cultural beliefs influence the experience of it. And I will actually show you that they can be explained also from a process point of view. So I do this with respect. I am trying to make a difference. Clearly, I think my intent is clear. Where I do want to point out that I will be challenging some existing beliefs and ideas about it. I am at the same time, though, offering a pretty logical and straightforward alternative. And as I say, you'll see that actually doing this, adopting this kind of process view will actually help explain, the nature of why our experiences are in fact so different. So I hope you'll, come along and help us sort of unravel madness together. And what I want to do actually is, get right into the piece that is actually unique and give you an idea, how we can actually map our experience as a process. As I said, for me, it was pretty obvious that the new thing that had arrived in my life out of the blue was this thing called hearing voices, or after I went to the doctor in about week 8, he described it as auditory hallucinations, which is a fairly useful technical term of this experience, as I say, that is sort of commonly called hearing voices. So I look at this then from a process point of view as a new stimulus. So this jack in the box, which is the icon I use to represent it, is presenting new stimuli. These stimuli are what researchers in the field call the phenomenology of hearing voices. And I'm adding this dimension here because actually we evaluate stimuli in a context. We typically are putting ourselves into situations, so we're at home, or we're going to work, or we're going into a meeting, and those things, those habitats that we're moving into, or spaces that we're moving into, are what create our expectation of a stimulus. And in particular, when there's a mismatch between these two, we get a strong reaction. Now, of course, we're getting some kind of reaction anyway. The ones we notice are the ones that are unpleasant, or are surprising, or are of a greater magnitude than usual. And so this initial reaction is an emotional response. So it's a body response to new information arriving. And I'm trying to filter that. I'm sort of comparing it to my patterns, my history, what I expect in the context, what I'm looking to do, with my life in future, or in that, or in that context. So what's producing the reaction typically with the voices that we hear is that actually they're introducing conflict in some way. And this is why it's generally provoking an unpleasant emotion. And the thing with this is that it gets your attention and it holds your attention until you find a good answer. So this holding the attention is what I'm calling our response. This is the piece where I'm answering the what the bleep questions in response to this stimulus. And it's my emotion that's holding my attention. And so I'm answering what the bleep questions. So in doing that, I'm assessing the implications, of this new stimulus. And of course, what that does is it leads to a number of interpretations. So this is a bit of an if then, if this, then that sort of process, or what if kind of process. And of course, I'm showing this as expanding, because this is kind of what happens is a stimulus can produce many questions and answers, some of which we discard, some of which we don't, and we can reach several interpretations even from the same stimulus sometimes. So what happens then is, after a bit of time with voices, you've accumulated a bit of a history, and each new stimulus actually fires up a bunch of associations. You have a relationship with this phenomenon. You've reached a number of interpretations, and these are growing step by step, day by day. As you interact with this phenomenon, it's moving the story along. And of course, what happens then is even a single comment by voices, provokes a reaction and a response in the person. And you have this little episode of answering the what the bleep questions, which has some sort of outcome, in the mind at very least. So I find that, as I say, even a simple comment will actually provoke an episode of thinking. And you'll see that some of the things that voices say are things like this man is going to. So the content here in this case is something that is predictive, and of course that shapes the response. It kind of has me thinking, well, how do the voices know what I'm going to be doing, for example, is a pretty logical question to ask. There aren't that many questions. They're who, what, why, where, when, how. We're asking formats of those 6 questions basically, and reaching some sort of interpretation. And I said this continues. Each little thing that voices say then just prompts another little cycle of reaction, response, interpretation. So this is one where my voices are just sort of commenting on what I'm doing and saying please don't. They don't always say please. Either way, it's irritating, and of course this is the problem. It creates this reaction. There's not a lot you can do about it, so it gets very frustrating. This kind of idea, just you wait, Greggy boy, that's what my voices call me, is obviously a threat. So the emotional, the emotional outcome, in addition to the reaction, the emotional outcome is an unpleasant one. And I'm just indicating this with a warmer color. And then of course there's something like this one, let me help you with. And this is voices implying that actually they have an influence on what's going on in the world. It's the same kind of predictive language. But what they're trying to do is connect their world to this world by kind of saying they can actually influence what's happening in my life. And of course, that's not very, very pleasant either. And then of course, voices can introduce themes. So they introduce topics that I might not ordinarily have been thinking about. I mean, I don't think about ancestors every day. I certainly have happy memories of my ancestors, but I certainly don't think of the relationship between humans and our ancestors every day. Of course, so this is a kind of theme that voices introduced, obviously in an attempt to lead me towards particular interpretations. And what makes those interpretations more credible or more plausible is this kind of thing. So this is my voices saying, Greggy boy, you can't swear on the web. And the web is the name that one of several names that my voices have given to this space in which we communicate. So I'm hearing voices, my thoughts are expressed as the other half of that conversation. So there's clearly some sort of connection between voices and myself. And of course, voices claim that there is also a connection between me and you and everyone else around me, that we're connected. And what they're doing is they're claiming to interfere and intervene in this network or web that actually connects us. And whether they're using the words specifically or not, you have this experience of this connection to voices. And of course, that's provoking lots of what the belief questions, and voices here are inserting a theme to push my interpretations in a particular direction. I'm certainly going to evaluate them in the context of this frame of reference of ancestors that voices have introduced. Of course, my voices then sort of promptly added several others that are in the same vein. They are more plausible, knowing that this connection certainly between myself and voices in which my thoughts are shared, that provokes all sorts of questions about the implications of just this feature of the phenomenon. And of course, voices use that to introduce the idea of religion, which is not a pleasant experience at all. I'm not religious. I believe in love and respect, and I don't believe that I need religion to believe in those. So this was not a topic that I would think about ordinarily every day, but voices were throwing at me all the time. In fact, for 10 years now. When I pushed back on all of that, they introduced the idea of aliens. That didn't last too long, actually. Of course, the other one, that's pretty common in this sort of space is conspiracy. So conspiracy becomes plausible. Well, engaging the individual, the hearer. So Greggy Boy being a character in a conspiracy, arises from the fact that actually I'm not a fan of the revealed religions. I don't have a problem, with how people came to believe in them, but as an institution, I'm not a fan of it. So of course, because I'm saying I'm not a fan of that, voices use that to make me the enemy of the military-industrial complex. And of course, then make me co-opt me into the story of a conspiracy made possible by this unusual connection. So what's happening here is I'm getting this collection of episodes that I'm showing here as sort of neat little sort of boxes. But what's happening, so I'm trying to represent with this corner on the on the left and the top, is it's voices introducing a new context, either a new theme, a new context, which a new stimulus sort of provokes a new context. I've got a new piece of information that's arriving. Typically, its context is not relevant in my normal day-to-day activity. So it has this, because of that, it's actually bringing up its own context framework. A collection of these sort of episodes, they may not, as I said, be entirely sequential, they may overlap. Of course, they can be quite confusing that way. But they add up to the, first of all, an experience in the mind. So what's called the lived experience. And it's called the lived experience for a good reason. That's because this interaction, of this phenomenon is that it's an interaction at the same level of significance as a relationship. So people have a relationship with voices. It's a real live conversation that is hitting our reward signals, not always in a pleasant way. So in that sense, it is an actual relationship and is a lived experience in the mind. And of course, some of that spills over into behavior and outcomes in life. Most of it actually is problematic, of course, in some way, because this is a pretty distressing experience. So what I'm doing here is simply showing you that actually is the process that I'm talking about. So independent of content, we can describe this as a process. But then, of course, the content, so what voices say, is of course relevant. I'm not saying you can ignore it. I'm simply saying that actually there are patterns to it, and we can understand the content as stories. That's kind of how we map our experiences, and then on top of that, actually, these kinds of themes are more credible primarily because of our experience of the phenomenology. And these aren't the only themes, of course. If you've been abused as a child, for example, a lot of people, that's a highly emotional topic, of course. And of course, if your voices are badgering you about that, that will be a theme that is producing a very strong reaction, and a what the bleep response. I'm simply saying that actually you can map all of this, as a process and actually you can understand the content in terms of either the story that voices are imposing on you, or the story of your own life. So part of the problem with current models is that actually we're diagnosing people based on their interpretations, which are typically called delusions, these sort of episodes, which are panic, paranoia, mania, so the emotional sort of expression of them, and then of course some of this, as I say, spills over into behavior, and is the kind of stuff that gets people, locked away for 72 hours, as I had, or put into an institution for a while. And what I'll show you through these videos is actually we need to be looking at all the stuff that precedes this, outward expression of this experience, and we can understand it in the context of basic mind processes. Essentially our basic predictive perception process is more or less what I'm talking about here. So this is why I think a process approach will work, because it actually offers a way of understanding many experiences based on one process, which is fundamentally, sort of brain-based before it becomes mind-based. And of course, our brains operate in very, very similar ways. So with that, what I want to do is introduce a definition of madness based on that process thinking, and it's pretty straightforward in two sentences. So I describe madness as the struggle to achieve a state of predictable well-being while exposed to extreme stimuli. So predictable well-being is what the mind is trying to do. That's how it's evolved. The thing that's getting in the way of that is the extreme stimuli. And actually, it is the processing of those unusual stimuli that leads extreme states, because they make no sense in the world that we live in. And we get engaged in this constant cycle of asking the, what the bleep questions in a reaction response interpretation cycle provoked by virtually every comment that voices make, because it's connecting to our history and our relationship with voices. So this is what Mad Sense is about, and of course I'll expand on that in much more detail. And of course this previous slide is more or less the map of how I will actually map the content on this channel. Then what I want to talk about is, of course, the audiences that I'm hoping to reach with this video. They're pretty straightforward. The first is the group of people who hear voices and experience extreme states, and their family and friends, because it impacts them as well. What I'm offering is a recovery model based on this new understanding, helping people identify their phenomenology, their experience, the impact of that on their life, and then offering a suite of tools. These are mind strategies for addressing the phenomenology directly. This is what I do. It's derived from my practice of neuro-linguistic programming, which is about how language programs the mind, which is something I learned in the business context as a management consultant before I started to hear voices. And I realized actually that's what I was doing differently. And that's actually always helping me cope with what have been particularly cruel voices. And I've turned that, as I say, into a suite of mind strategies to offer a simplified response to this phenomenon. For mental health professionals and researchers, I'm hoping to work in a sort of co-production mode, proving the efficacy of these models. So I would like to work with people who have a service delivery component and a research component. But all of these will be interested in the model, whether or not we're working together. Of course, I would offer, it offers you new ideas to think about service delivery. This is based on critical success factors as opposed to psychoanalysis of individuals. So given that difference, it makes it much easier to think about how you implement it at scale. And of course, so because the theory is designed into the tools, it's also much easier to, to train people, and of course to engage, train mental health professionals in the models. And of course, it's much easier, of course, to engage people who have voices in using them and applying them. Then the other group, that I'm hoping to have sort of conversations with and offer insights to. I'm not so much offering sort of complete ideas here, but certainly, challenging questions and some insights. The first, of course, is ethical pharma, because I'll show you here that actually the neuroleptics in particular that we're using in the space, are not actually addressing the real problem. But of course, there are some other ideas about some things that might, certainly things that would actually aid, in the process of recovery. And the other is, is that actually making this accessible on a large scale is something that needs to happen on a digital basis. You'll kind of see that these videos, if you like, are part of the education process. The tools themselves, I think, lend themselves to being applied in apps and in games. So I would like to work with organizations in the life sciences space that are doing this. I have over 25 years of experience as a business consultant, and it was a big chunk of that actually was in pharmaceuticals and life sciences, primarily in drug safety and research. So thank you for listening to this video. I would like to keep as much of the recovery and tools content as possible free for people who hear voices. To do that, I've set up a fundraiser on crowdrise.com called Someone You Know Hears Voices. If you get value from it and can contribute, I would very much appreciate that. Please use #MadSense if you're commenting on social media. If you'd like to work together, you can reach me on greg@mad-sense.com. Please subscribe to this channel and sign up on my website. Find me here on Twitter. And of course, my journey in developing this stuff didn't happen in a vacuum. I've been a very active member of the mental health community in New York when I was living there. Worked a lot with Intervoice and the Hearing Voices movement. Went to support groups, did the facilitator training, which is the thing they would welcome support for, by the way. That's a very, very valuable service that they're offering, spreading facilitator training globally. I've been to some of the conferences. So this is so Intervoice and the Hearing Voices movement. The one is the policy body. The other one is the body creating support groups, are a very valuable contributor in the space. There's MAD in America, Changing the Conversation. There are a number of academic groups. So I've worked with people at Columbia University in New York, on the Hearing the Voice project at Durham University in the UK, and the International Consortium on Hallucination Research, which is a number of researchers just coming together under this banner. And then there's a big group of mental health professionals under the banner of ISPS, actively searching for alternative approaches to dealing with psychosis. All of them worthy of support. So we'd all welcome some help if you can. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy this.